secret. It's about the desk drawer. I've been so scared.
Three months after my husband Richard's funeral, my son placed an assisted living brochure beside my dinner plate and told me it was time to sell my home. Before I could answer, my grandson, Ethan, slipped his small hand into mine. "Grandma," he whispered, glancing toward Richard's locked study. "Grandpa told me never to trust that drawer." After they left, I stood alone inside the room Richard had forbidden anyone to enter during his final weeks. His desk drawer, locked for months, was slightly open. My hands trembled as I pulled it toward me. On top lay a legal document bearing Richard's signature. The first line read, "Petition for determination of incapacity, Carolyn Hall." My dead husband had been preparing to declare me mentally unfit, or at least that was what someone wanted me to believe. Before I tell you what else I found inside that drawer, please let me know what you would have done. Would you have kept reading or closed it and walked away? If this story has already touched something in your heart, please like the video and subscribe so we can continue this journey together. And tell me in the comments where you're watching, from what time it is there, and whether you believe the people closest to us can sometimes hide the most painful truths. For several seconds, I could only stare at my own name. Petition for determination of incapacity, Carolyn Hall. The words looked cold and official, as if my entire life could be reduced to one sentence on a legal form. I touched Richard's signature at the bottom of the page. I had watched him sign birthday cards, mortgage papers, school permission slips, and anniversary notes for 46 years. It looked like his handwriting. That was what frightened me most. I lowered myself into his leather chair and pulled the rest of the documents from the drawer. There were nearly 30 pages, all arranged in careful stacks. Richard had always organized everything: taxes in blue folders, insurance in green, medical records in white. Even after his health began to fail, he never misplaced important papers. The first stack contained a durable power of attorney. It named David as the person authorized to manage my bank accounts, property, medical bills, and investments. The document was not supposed to take effect after my death. It was supposed to take effect when I became unable to make responsible decisions. I read that sentence 3 times. Beneath it was a draft deed transferring our home to David. The house Richard and I had bought in 1983. The house where Susan and David had grown up. The house where Richard had planted an oak tree for our 25th anniversary. According to the document, David would become the legal owner, while I retained the right to live there temporarily. Temporarily. My hands began to shake. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered into the empty room. Richard's photograph sat on the corner of the desk. He was smiling in it, wearing the navy sweater I had bought him one Christmas. The picture had been taken before the hospital visits, before the weight loss, before fear entered his eyes. I turned the photograph face down. The next folder contained handwritten notes about me. March 7th. Carolyn misplaced her car keys and accused Richard of moving them. April 12th. Carolyn left a saucepan unattended on the stove. May 3rd. Carolyn forgot a dental appointment. May 18th. Carolyn appeared confused after returning from the grocery store. Each event had happened, but not the way the notes described. I had misplaced my keys on March 7th because Richard had suffered chest pain that morning. I drove him to the hospital, sat beside him for 6 hours, and came home exhausted. The keys were in the pocket of the coat I had worn to the emergency room. The saucepan had burned because Richard fell in the bathroom. I left the kitchen to help him. I missed the dental appointment because the clinic changed the date and called the wrong telephone number. And the day I seemed confused after shopping, I had just learned that Richard's heart condition was getting worse. Those were not signs that I could no longer care for myself. They were signs that I had been caring for a dying husband. Yet on paper, every tired moment had been transformed into evidence against me. I found a letter carrying the name of my family doctor, Mark Reynolds. It stated that I had shown progressive cognitive impairment and should receive a complete competency evaluation. I had never discussed dementia with Dr. Reynolds. Not once. The room felt suddenly too small. I stood, walked to the window, and opened it. Cold Iowa air entered the study, but it did nothing to stop the heat rising beneath my skin. Had Richard been watching me all those months? Had he smiled while quietly documenting every mistake I remembered one evening when I had forgotten where I placed the electric bill? Richard had taken my hand and said, "Ellie, everyone forgets things. You're tired." Had that kindness been real, or had he written another note after I went to bed? That question hurt more than the legal papers. I spent the night at the kitchen table with the documents spread before me. I did not sleep. Every sound made me look toward the hallway. At 2 a.m, I almost called David. Then I remembered his face when Ethan whispered to me. He had been watching us from across the dining room. By sunrise, I had decided not to tell him everything. At 8:15, the doorbell rang. David stood on the porch holding 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag from my favorite bakery. "Morning, Mom," he said. "I thought you might need company." He had not called first. I stepped aside and let him enter. "You're up early," I said. "I've been worried about you." He kissed my cheek and walked directly toward the kitchen. His voice was calm, but his eyes moved through the house as though he was checking whether anything had changed. He set the coffee down. "Did you sleep?" "Not much." His gaze shifted toward the hallway. "Still thinking about the house?" "I've been thinking about many things." I watched him carefully. "Including your father." The smile left his face for half a second. "What about Dad?" I walked toward the study. David followed. The moment he entered the room, his eyes went straight to the drawer. Not the desk, not Richard's photograph. The drawer. His shoulders tightened. "You opened it," he said. It was not a question. I turned to face him. "How did you know it was locked?" He hesitated. "Dad kept that drawer locked for years." "No, he didn't. He started locking it during the last few months." David looked away. I placed the incapacity petition on the desk between us. "Did your father believe I was losing my mind?" He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom, those are private legal documents. They have my name on them." "He was trying to protect you." "From what?" "From being alone, from making mistakes, from people taking advantage of you." The last sentence sounded rehearsed. I lifted the power of attorney, and giving you control of everything was his solution. Dad trusted me. Then why didn't he tell me? David's expression softened. He reached for my hand, but I moved it away. "He didn't want to frighten you," he said. "He knew how proud you were." "Proud? You know what I mean." "No, David, I don't." His jaw tightened. "He was sick. He worried about what would happen after he died. He asked me to take responsibility." The word struck me like a slap. Responsibility, not support me, not help me. Take responsibility for me. I studied my son's face. He looked tired. There were dark circles beneath his eyes, and his expensive jacket was wrinkled. But there was something else there too. Fear. You knew these papers were here, I said. I knew Dad had prepared some documents. Did you read them? He discussed them with me. Did he sign them in front of you? David paused. It was brief, but I noticed. I don't remember every detail. You just said he discussed them with you. That doesn't mean I watched every signature. His voice had grown sharper. I picked up the doctor's letter. Did he discuss this too? David glanced at it and immediately looked away. I'm not a doctor. That wasn't my question. He walked to the desk and began gathering the papers. You shouldn't be going through this alone. Let me take these. I placed my hand over the stack. No. He stared at me. Mom, you're upset. I have every right to be upset. These documents could be confusing. They are not confusing. They say my husband wanted me declared incompetent and my son placed in control of my home. David released the papers. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he gave me the same gentle smile he had used when he wanted permission to stay out late as a teenager. Dad loved you, he said. Everything he did was for you. I wanted to believe him. That was the danger. David finished his coffee quickly and said he had a meeting. Before leaving the study, he leaned toward the open drawer. His eyes moved across the empty interior as though he expected to see something else. Something that was not there. At the front door, he turned back. Mom, don't call Susan. The name shocked me. I didn't mention Susan. His face changed, only slightly, but enough. She'll hear about Dad's estate eventually, he said. And you know how she is. No, I replied quietly. I know what you told me she is. David left without answering. I locked the door behind him and returned to the study. The documents no longer felt like proof of Richard's betrayal. They felt like bait, and my son had just shown me that he was terrified I might look beneath them. David's warnings stayed with me long after his car disappeared down the street. Don't call Susan. He had said it before I mentioned her name. That meant he was not only worried about the documents. He was worried about what might happen if I spoke to my daughter. I returned to Richard's study and locked the door. For the first time in my life, I felt the need to protect something from my own son. I spread the papers across the desk again. The power of attorney was dated 6 months before Richard died. I had been so shaken by the contents that I had barely noticed the notary stamp at the bottom. October 14th. I knew that date. Richard had been at Mercy One Medical Center that entire week. He had suffered severe chest pain on October 11th. By the 14th, he was receiving strong medication and could barely hold a water cup without spilling it. His right hand shook so badly that I had signed his meal forms for him. Yet the document showed a smooth, confident signature. Richard Hall. The letters looked familiar, but they were too perfect. I found the hospital calendar I had kept in the kitchen drawer. I used to write down every test medication and doctor's visit because Richard often forgot what the nurses told him. October 14th was circled in red. Cardiac procedure. No visitors before 3 p.m. I stared at the note. The document claimed Richard had signed before a notary that morning. That was impossible. At 11, the doorbell rang again. This time, Melissa stood outside holding a thick folder and wearing a pale blue coat. Her smile was warm polished and completely wrong for the tension inside my house. I brought you something, she said. I did not invite her in immediately. Did David send you? Her smile tightened. We're both worried about you, Carolyn. She rarely called me Carolyn. Usually she called me Mom when she wanted something. I stepped aside. Melissa entered and placed the folder on the kitchen table. Inside were brochures from 3 senior living communities. The most expensive one had a photograph of smiling gray-haired women drinking tea beside a fireplace. David and I toured this place last month, she said. It's beautiful. Why were you touring senior communities without asking me? We wanted to be prepared for what she sat across from me. For the reality that you shouldn't be alone. I have lived in this house for 41 years. That doesn't make it safe. I drive, I cook, I pay my bills. Melissa gave me a sympathetic expression. People experiencing cognitive decline often believe they're functioning better than they are. The sentence chilled me. It was impossible to defend myself against that logic. If I disagreed, she could call it denial. If I became angry, she could call it confusion. If I stayed quiet, she could claim I did not understand. When did you decide I was losing my mind? I asked. No one said that. The papers in Richard's drawer did. Her eyes shifted toward the hallway, only for a second. But I saw it. You opened the desk, she asked. Yes. You shouldn't have gone through Richard's private things while you were upset. They were not private. They concerned my house, my money, and my mental health. Melissa folded her hands. Richard was afraid this would happen. What would happen? That you would take the documents personally. I almost laughed. How should I take a petition declaring me incompetent? He was trying to protect you. That is exactly what David said. Because it's true. She opened the brochure and pointed to a photograph of a bright apartment. Richard liked this place. I looked at her. Richard visited it. He reviewed the information. That wasn't my question. Melissa hesitated. David may have shown him the website. Richard hated looking at websites. He still knew about it. When I don't remember the exact date, before or after October 14th, her fingers stopped moving. Why does that date matter? I did not answer. Instead, I carried the power of attorney from the study and placed it in front of her. This was notarized while Richard was hospitalized. Melissa looked at the page without touching it. Maybe the notary came to the hospital. Did she? You would have to ask David. He told me Richard signed papers at home. Melissa's face changed. Then maybe I misunderstood. You just said a notary may have gone to the hospital. I said maybe. Which is it? She closed the brochure. Carolyn, grief can make people suspicious. There it was again. Not an answer. A diagnosis. I leaned forward. Did you see Richard sign this? No? Did David? I assume so. Did Richard ask you to find a place for me to live? Melissa pushed back her chair. I came here to help. I will not sit here and be interrogated. I asked 3 simple questions. You're upset. I am alert. The words came out stronger than I expected. For the first time, Melissa did not look sympathetic. She looked angry. Then the expression vanished. I think you should rest, she said softly. David will call later. She gathered the brochures, but left one on the table. As she walked toward the door, she paused. You haven't contacted Susan, have you? My stomach tightened. Why does everyone keep asking me that Melissa turned? Because Susan has already hurt this family once. You mean the money she stole $38,000 from you and Richard? My stomach tightened. Why does everyone keep asking me that? Melissa turned. Because Susan has already hurt this family once. You mean the money? She stole $38,000 from you and Richard. That is what David said. It's what happened. Did you see her take it? Melissa stared at me. No, but Richard believed David. I thought of the secret papers. Richard had apparently believed many things I never knew about. After Melissa left, I checked every door and window. The house was quiet, but I no longer felt alone. I felt watched. That afternoon, David called. Melissa said you upset her? She brought me brochures for a place I never asked to see. She was trying to help. Was your father trying to help when he signed that power of attorney? David exhaled sharply. We already discussed this. No, you gave me an explanation. I'm asking for facts. What facts? Where did Richard sign it? At the hospital. My grip tightened around the phone. This morning, you told me he signed papers at home. There was silence. Then David said, I said some documents W. are signed at home. There were several. At the hospital. My grip tightened around the phone. This morning, you told me he signed papers at home. There was silence. Then David said I said some documents were signed at home. There were several. Who was the notary? I don't remember. You run a construction company. You remember every contract you sign? This was 6 months ago. Your father was too weak to hold a pen. You weren't in his room every minute. I froze. I was there every day, and you were exhausted. You may not remember everything clearly. His voice was calm. That frightened me more than if he had shouted. David, I said, are you telling me my memory cannot be trusted? I'm saying you've been under stress. Is that what you told the lawyer too? Another silence. Then his tone hardened. Mom stopped digging through Dad's paperwork. You're going to create problems you don't understand? The line went dead. I stood in the kitchen listening to the empty phone. He had not denied speaking to a lawyer. He had not explained the date, and he had tried to make me doubt my own memory. I decided to move the documents. I placed them inside a grocery bag and hid them beneath a loose floorboard in my bedroom closet. It was not clever, but it was the one place David had never had reason to search. Then I went to the hallway shelf for the spare key to the back door. Richard and I had always kept it behind a framed photograph of our children. The frame was there. The key was gone. I searched the shelf, the drawer below it, and the kitchen counter. Nothing. That night, I left the porch light on and pushed a chair beneath the back doorknob. At 1:17 in the morning, a soft, metallic sound woke me. I sat up in bed. Another sound followed. The back door handle was turning. Slowly, carefully. Someone outside had a key. I picked up Richard's old wooden cane and moved into the hallway. The house was dark, except for the porch light shining beneath the kitchen door. The lock turned halfway, then stopped against the chair. Whoever stood outside pushed once, twice. I held my breath. A shadow passed across the small window above the sink. I wanted to call David. My finger hovered over his name. Then I remembered his threat. Stop digging. I called 911 instead. Before the dispatcher answered, footsteps moved across the porch. A car door closed in the driveway, and an engine started without headlights. By the time the police arrived, the street was empty. The officer found no damage to the lock. Whoever tried to enter probably had a key, he said. After he left, I stood alone in the kitchen until sunrise. I had spent 3 months believing my greatest danger was grief. Now I understood something far worse. Someone wanted access to Richard's study, and only 2 people knew I had opened that drawer. I did not sleep after the police left. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like someone standing outside my bedroom window. By 7 that morning, I had made one decision. I was going to call Susan. My fingers hovered over her number for nearly 5 minutes. 3 years. That was how long it had been since we had spoken like mother and daughter. The last conversation ended with shouting. The one before, that ended with tears. The last words I had said to her still haunted me. If your father doesn't believe you, neither do I. I had repeated Richard's judgment instead of listening to my own daughter. I pressed the call button before I could lose my nerve. The phone rang 4 times. Hello? Her voice was older than I remembered. calmer, colder. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Hello?" she repeated. "Susan." Silence. Then a quiet sigh. I wondered how long it would take. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I almost didn't. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. "I heard about Dad," she finally said. "I know. I came to the funeral. I saw you. You never walked over." She wasn't accusing me. That somehow hurt even more. I didn't know what to say. "You could have said hello." She was right. Instead, I had stood beside David while Susan remained alone near the back of the church. "I was ashamed," I admitted. Another long silence followed. Finally, she asked, "Why are you calling now?" I looked toward Richard's study. "Because I think I've made another terrible mistake." Her breathing changed. "What happened?" "I found something in Dad's desk." "What kind of something?" "Legal papers." I briefly described the petition declaring me incompetent, the power of attorney, the handwritten notes. When I finished, Susan didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked one question. "Who showed you those papers?" "No one." "You found them yourself?" "Yes." "I need you to answer carefully, Mom." Her voice had changed completely. "Has David seen that you've opened the drawer?" "Yes." "And Melissa?" "Yes." Another pause. "Don't leave those documents where they can find them." The certainty in her voice made my stomach tighten. "Susan, what aren't you telling me?" She took a slow breath. "Before I answer that, I need to ask you something." "Anything. Do you still believe I stole your money?" The question broke something inside me. 3 years. She had carried that accusation for 3 years. I don't know what to believe anymore. She laughed quietly. Not because anything was funny, because she had expected that answer. "Then let me tell you what actually happened." I closed my eyes. "I'm listening." "You remember when Dad had all those hospital bills?" "Of course. He asked me to help organize the payments because I deal with medical paperwork every day." "I remember. I logged into your retirement account to verify a transfer. So far, everything matched what David had told us." "It did at first." Her voice remained calm. "Then I noticed withdrawals I couldn't explain." "Withdrawals?" "Large ones." "How large?" "The first was $12,000. My heart skipped. "Then 18,000. Another pause. "Then 25,000. I gripped the phone tighter. I thought maybe Dad had invested the money. So I checked where it went. "And it wasn't going to medical bills? It wasn't?" "No. It was being transferred into an LLC." "I don't understand." "The company's name was Hawthorne Ridge Development." The name meant nothing to me. "I searched the state business records." "What did you find?" "David's business partner was listed as one of the registered managers." I sat down slowly. "No." I confronted David. "What did he say?" "He denied everything." "Then what happened?" "The next day, Dad called me into his office. I already knew the rest, or at least I thought I did. He asked if I'd taken money. Yes. And I said no. You did. I begged him to let me show him the bank records. What did Dad do? He said David had proof. My throat tightened. The proof was a photocopy of a check. A check? Made out to me. I never saw it. Neither did I. Susan laughed bitterly. I asked to see the original. And David said he'd already given it to the bank. I remembered that afternoon. Richard had been furious. David had stood quietly beside him, looking hurt, looking disappointed, as though he wished none of it had happened. I had believed every expression on his face. "What happened after that?" I whispered. "Dad told me to leave. And You stood beside him. Tears blurred my vision. "I know. You didn't ask for my side. I know. You didn't call. I know. You didn't even visit." Each sentence landed harder than the last. "I was wrong," I whispered. Yes, I was terribly wrong. For the first time since the conversation began, Susan's voice softened. "I know you loved me." "I still do?" "I believe that." "Then why didn't you fight harder?" I asked. "I did." "What do you mean?" "I tried calling for months." I frowned. "I never received." "I know." "What?" "I think David blocked me." I sat frozen. "He told me both of you wanted no contact. He told us you never called." "I called 32 times." 32. I still have the phone records. My stomach twisted. I walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept old bills. My phone company statements from 3 years ago were still there. I flipped through them quickly. Susan's number appeared. Once, twice, 5 times, then more. Calls I had never answered because I had never heard them ring. I remembered something strange. Around that time, David had insisted on updating my cell phone because he said it was too complicated. He had spent nearly an hour changing settings. My hands started shaking. "Susan." "Yes. I think he blocked your number." "I've wondered that for years." Neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me since opening Richard's drawer. "Did Dad ever apologize?" Another long silence. Then her voice broke. 2 weeks before he died." "What happened?" "He called me." "What did he say?" "He said," I heard her take a shaky breath, "Susan, I should have believed you sooner." I closed my eyes. "He admitted it?" "Yes." "What else?" "He wanted to meet." "Did he tell you why?" "No." "Why not?" "He said the phone wasn't safe." I opened my eyes. "What does that mean?" I asked him the same thing. "What did he say?" "He said," again she paused, "if I explain now, someone may destroy the only proof I have left." A chill ran through my entire body. Richard had known. Not only that David was lying, he had known someone was watching. "He asked me to come to Iowa." "Why didn't you?" "I booked the flight." "What happened?" "He died the day before." Neither of us said anything. I stared toward the study door. Richard hadn't died believing Susan was guilty. He had died trying to fix what he had broken. "I need to see those papers," Susan said quietly. "I know. I'm driving down tomorrow. It's almost 4 hours." "I don't care." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Susan?" "Yes, I'm sorry." Silence. "I should have listened." More silence. "I should have protected you." When she finally answered, her voice was gentle. "I'm not ready to forgive you." "I understand. But I am willing to help you." The words filled me with both hope and shame. I don't deserve that. Maybe not. She wasn't cruel. She was honest. And Mom? Yes. Don't tell David I'm coming. Why? Because if he's willing to lie once, she stopped, he'll lie again. After we hung up, I sat alone in the kitchen. For 3 years I had believed my daughter betrayed this family. Now I realized something much worse. Someone hadn't just stolen our money. Someone had stolen our trust, and I had helped them do it. The next afternoon, I stood on my front porch watching a silver SUV pull into my driveway. For 3 years, I had imagined what this moment would feel like. I expected anger, Instead, I felt guilt. Susan stepped out wearing blue jeans, a gray sweater, and the same determined expression she had carried since she was 16 years old. She looked older, not because of wrinkles, because disappointment changes a person's face. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I walked toward her. "I've missed you," I whispered. She hesitated before letting me hug her. It wasn't rejection. It wasn't forgiveness either. It was simply honesty. "I came because you're my mother," she said quietly. "I know. Let's find out what Dad wanted us to see." We walked into the house together. As Susan crossed the front doorway, she looked around slowly. "Nothing has changed." "I couldn't bring myself to change anything." She nodded. "I can see that." When we entered Richard's study, Susan didn't sit down immediately. She touched the back of Richard's chair. Then she looked at his photograph. "I was so angry at him," she said. "So was I. I never thought I'd miss him this much." Neither did I. Grief had a cruel way of making love and pain exist at the same time. I placed every document on the desk exactly as I had found them. Susan didn't begin reading. She began observing. She picked up the doctor's letter first. Not the petition, not the power of attorney. The doctor's letter. Within 30 seconds, she frowned. "Something's wrong. You already found something." She pointed to the top of the page. "Look here." I leaned closer. "I don't understand." "The clinic logo." "What about it?" "They stopped using this logo almost 2 years ago." I blinked. "You're sure?" "I worked with their discharge department several times." She pointed again. "They updated their branding after merging with another medical network." I stared at the page. I would never have noticed. Susan continued reading. Another minute passed. She shook her head. "This gets worse." "What now?" "The address." "What about it? It isn't current." I looked carefully. She was right. The letter listed Dr. Reynolds' old office. They moved to a new building 18 months ago. A strange feeling spread through me. Hope. Tiny. Dangerous. "What else?" Susan pointed to the doctor's signature. "He doesn't sign like this." "You know his signature. I've received patient transfers from him dozens of times." She picked up another page. "And this terminology?" She frowned again. "Doesn't sound like Dr. Reynolds." "What do you mean?" "He would never describe normal forgetfulness as progressive cognitive impairment without a full neurological evaluation." She looked at me. "Mom." "Yes." "I don't think he wrote this." The room suddenly felt lighter. Not because the truth was becoming easier, because maybe, just maybe, Richard hadn't betrayed me. "We're going to see him," Susan said. "Today, right now." Fortunately, Dr. Reynolds still practiced only 15 minutes away. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Oh, Mrs. Hall," she said warmly. "I'm so sorry about your husband." "Thank you?" "We need a few minutes with Dr. Reynolds." She looked at the papers in my hands. "Is everything all right?" "I'm not sure." 30 minutes later, the doctor welcomed us into his office. He looked genuinely surprised to see Susan. "I didn't know you were in town." "I wasn't until this morning." I handed him the letter. "I need you to tell me if you wrote this." He adjusted his glasses. His smile disappeared. He read the page once, then a second time. Finally, he placed it on his desk. "I did not write this." My heart pounded. "You're certain?" "I am." He opened a drawer and removed several official documents. "This is my current letterhead." It looked completely different. New logo, new address, different formatting. Then he signed a blank sheet of paper. His signature looked nothing like the one on the letter. "Mrs. Hall," he said gently, "I have never diagnosed you with dementia." "What about memory loss?" "You've mentioned normal forgetfulness." He smiled kindly. "So have I." Susan asked another question. "Did you ever recommend that Carolyn be declared mentally incompetent?" Dr. Reynolds looked genuinely shocked. "Absolutely not." He opened my medical file on his computer. "The only concerns we've discussed during the last 2 years have been stress, grief, insomnia, and caregiver exhaustion." He turned the screen toward us. "There is nothing here suggesting cognitive decline." I felt tears fill my eyes. Not because I was sad, because for days I had secretly wondered whether I really was forgetting things. Whether David and Melissa saw something I couldn't. Now I knew. Someone had wanted me to believe I couldn't trust my own mind. Dr. Reynolds leaned forward. "If someone is using this letter as legal evidence, you need an attorney." "We're working on that." "I'll gladly provide an affidavit confirming this document is fraudulent." Susan squeezed my hand beneath the desk. For the first time since opening Richard's drawer, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt certainty. When we returned home, my relief lasted less than 10 seconds. Melissa's car was parked in my driveway. I looked at Susan. I didn't tell her we were gone. Neither of us spoke. We walked inside. Melissa was sitting comfortably in my living room drinking coffee from one of my mugs. She stood as we entered. "There you are." I stared at her. "How did you get inside?" She smiled. "David gave me a key." "I never gave David permission to make copies." "We were worried." "Worried enough to let yourselves into my house." "You weren't answering your phone." Susan stepped forward. "This isn't your home." Melissa looked at her without smiling. "I didn't realize you were visiting." "I didn't realize you let yourself into other people's houses." Melissa ignored her. She looked at me instead. "Carolyn, I hope Susan isn't filling your head with old stories. My head is just fine." "Good." She nodded politely. "Because grief can make people vulnerable." There it was again, always the same message. You're confused, you're vulnerable, you need us. Susan removed the forged letter from her bag. "We just came from Dr. Reynolds." Melissa's eyes narrowed. "Really? He says he never wrote this." Melissa didn't answer immediately. Then she shrugged. Perhaps another physician handled the evaluation. There was no evaluation. "I'm sure there's an explanation." Susan stepped closer. "The explanation is that someone forged a medical document?" Melissa laughed softly. "What an awful accusation." "No," Susan replied. "The awful part is whoever expected an elderly widow to believe it." For the first time, Melissa lost control of her expression, only for a heartbeat. But I saw fear, not guilt, fear. She looked toward Richard's study. Just one glance. Then she smiled again. "I think everyone is overreacting." She placed my coffee mug into the sink. "As long as Carolyn is safe, that's all that matters." She headed for the front door. Halfway there, she stopped. "I'd be careful, Carolyn." "About what?" "Sometimes people come back into families only because they smell money." She looked directly at Susan. Then she walked outside. Neither of us followed. We waited until her car disappeared. Only then did Susan speak. "Did you notice what?" She kept looking at the study. I nodded slowly. Like she wanted to make sure something was still there. We returned to Richard's desk. The forged papers still covered the surface. Susan examined the empty drawer again. She ran her fingers across the bottom, then along each side. Finally, she tapped gently against the wooden base. Tap, 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 thunk. She froze. Did you hear that? Hear what? She tapped again. 3 corners sounded solid. The 4th sounded hollow. She crouched lower. There shouldn't be empty space under this drawer. I knelt beside her. She slowly peeled back one corner of the green felt lining. The fabric lifted more easily than expected. Beneath it, a faint rectangular outline appeared in the wood, perfectly measured, almost invisible. Susan looked at me. This drawer isn't what it looks like. My pulse quickened. What are you saying? She smiled for the first time since arriving. I think your husband built a second compartment. Susan and I stared at the faint rectangle hidden beneath the green felt. Neither of us spoke. For the first time since Richard died, I felt as if he were standing beside us, silently asking us to keep going. Susan carefully peeled the felt back another inch. It wasn't glued very tightly, she whispered. Richard wanted someone to find it. Or someone he trusted. She slid her fingernail along the wooden outline until she stopped. There's something here. I leaned closer. Near the back corner was a tiny brass pin no larger than the head of a nail. I had never noticed it before. Susan pressed it gently. Nothing happened. She pressed harder. A soft click echoed inside the drawer. We looked at each other. Slowly, the wooden bottom lifted about half an inch. My heart nearly stopped. Oh, Richard. Susan carefully raised the false bottom. Beneath it was a hidden compartment no deeper than 2 inches. Inside lay 5 items, a thick envelope, several folded bank statements, a small black flash drive, an old brass key, and a handwritten letter with only 2 words on the front. For Carolyn. I reached for the letter first. My hands were shaking so badly that Susan had to steady the paper while I opened it. The handwriting was unmistakably Richard's. Not the stiff signature from the legal forms. His real handwriting, the handwriting that filled every birthday card he had ever given me. I began reading aloud. Ellie, if you're reading this, then someone has already shown you the papers above. I stopped. Tears blurred the page. Susan gently touched my shoulder. Keep going. I nodded. The papers above are not the truth. They are the trap. Please trust the dates. Trust Susan. And forgive me for waiting too long. I wanted to protect you. Instead, I ended up hurting the people I love most. My voice broke. Susan quietly wiped tears from her own face. I continued. If I tell you everything too early, the evidence may disappear. If I wait too long, I may never get the chance. So I chose the only option I had left. I left the truth underneath the lie. I couldn't read anymore. I pressed the letter against my chest. Richard hadn't betrayed me. He had been trying to save me. But he had done it in the most painful way imaginable. I was wrong about him, I whispered. Susan looked down. He was wrong about me too. She wasn't angry when she said it, only sad. I nodded slowly. You're right. We sat quietly for nearly a minute. Then Susan unfolded the bank statements. Let's see what Dad wanted us to find. The statements came from 3 different accounts. Richard's retirement account, our joint checking account, a home equity line of credit. Every page contained highlighted transactions. Richard had circled them in red ink. The earliest transfer was just over $5,000. The next one was nearly $9,000. Then $15,000. The amounts continued growing. $22,000? $31,000, $48,000. Every transfer went to the same company. Hawthorne Ridge Development, LLC. Susan took out her phone. I want to confirm something. Within seconds, she opened the Iowa Business Registry. There it is. She turned the screen toward me. Company name Hawthorne Ridge Development, LLC. One of the registered officers, David Hall. I covered my mouth. No. Susan slowly added the highlighted transfers together. 5,000, 9,000, 15,000, 22,000, 31,000. More pages, more transfers. When she finished calculating, she looked at me without speaking. How much? She swallowed. 214,000. I stared at her. $680. The room seemed to spin. Richard and I had spent 46 years saving that money. Skipping vacations, driving old cars, putting off home renovations, planning for retirement, planning for grandchildren, planning to grow old together. Over $200,000 gone. I looked through the statements myself. Some transfers carried Richard's electronic approval. Others occurred while he was hospitalized. One even happened the day after his cardiac procedure. He couldn't have authorized this, I whispered. He was unconscious most of that afternoon. Susan nodded. Exactly. We continued searching. Behind the bank statements were photocopies of several checks. Each one looked genuine. Each one bore Richard's signature. But now that I had his handwritten letter beside them, I noticed tiny differences. The loops, the spacing, the pressure of the pen. The signatures weren't identical. Someone had practiced. For a long time. Susan carefully stacked everything into separate piles. Financial theft. She pointed to the statements. Possible forgery. She pointed to the checks. False medical documentation. She tapped the doctor's letter. This wasn't one crime. She looked directly at me. This was a system. I had never thought of my son as a criminal. Even after everything. Hearing Susan describe it that way made something shift inside me. Not because I wanted to believe it, because I could no longer explain it away. What about the flash drive? I asked. Susan picked it up. There was no label, no writing, nothing. She plugged it into my old laptop. A password screen appeared. Dad protected it. We tried Richard's birthday. Wrong. Their wedding anniversary? Wrong. The address of the house? Wrong. Susan sighed. What would Dad choose? I closed my eyes. Richard had always used numbers that mattered emotionally. Then I remembered. The county fair? Susan frowned. What? The day we met? She laughed softly. Seriously? He never forgot it. I entered the date, July 18th. The computer unlocked immediately. Susan smiled through tears. He never forgot. Neither had I. The drive contained one folder. Recorded conversations. Inside were dozens of audio files. Each file had a date. The oldest was almost a year before Richard died. The newest, only 4 days before his funeral. I stared at the screen. He recorded someone. Susan nodded. But who? Before opening the recordings, we examined the last item, the brass key. It was old and unusually heavy. Definitely not a house key. I searched every drawer, cabinet, and lock inside the study. Nothing fit. We tried Richard's filing cabinet. Nothing. His gun safe. Nothing. The storage cabinet in the garage. Nothing. Susan turned it over. There must be something else. Engraved on one side were 3 tiny letters. JW. Does that mean anything to you? She asked. I shook my head. No. We set the key aside. Then I clicked the first audio file. Static filled the room. A chair scraped across the floor. Then, Richard's voice. Strong, calm, alive. I gasped. It had been months since I heard him speak. Even Susan covered her mouth. Neither of us had been prepared. Richard cleared his throat. If you're listening to this someday? The recording stopped, only 3 seconds long. We looked at each other. The wrong file? Susan whispered. I clicked another. Again, Richard's voice. This one lasted longer. He sounded tired, older. I've decided to begin documenting everything. He paused. If anything happens to me? The recording ended. Another incomplete file. Susan frowned. They're not in order. We sorted them by date, one by one. The newest file was labeled only December 11th. That was 6 days before Richard died. I moved the mouse toward it. Susan caught my wrist. Are you ready? I looked at Richard's letter. Trust Susan. Trust the dates. I took a deep breath. No, Susan nodded. Neither am I. We closed the laptop. Whatever Richard had recorded, he had believed it was important enough to hide beneath a false drawer. Important enough to risk everything. I carefully returned every item to the hidden compartment except the letter. That I folded gently and slipped into my sweater pocket. I wanted Richard close to my heart. For the first time in days, I no longer believed he had abandoned me. But another realization replaced that comfort. If Richard had hidden all of this, he must have believed someone would search the drawer. And whoever that someone was, had no idea the real evidence was still waiting beneath their fingertips. Neither Susan nor I slept that night. The laptop sat on Richard's desk closed, as if it were guarding every answer we had been searching for. I must have walked past it 20 times. Every time I reached for it, my hand stopped. I wasn't afraid of what Richard had recorded. I was afraid of hearing the people I loved become strangers. At 6 the next morning, Susan carried 2 mugs of coffee into the study. You ready? She asked. No. Me neither. She sat beside me anyway. I opened the laptop. The folder of recordings appeared exactly where we had left it. This time we selected the oldest complete file. The screen displayed a date. February 9th, nearly 10 months before Richard died. Static filled the speakers. Then Richard spoke. David closed the door. A chair scraped across the floor. My son's voice answered. It's closed. Richard sounded calm. I've been reviewing the retirement account. So, there are transfers I don't recognize. A pause. They're business expenses. Our retirement account doesn't pay business expenses. I was going to explain. When? Another silence. Then David sighed. I borrowed the money. I felt my stomach tighten. Susan lowered her eyes. Richard asked quietly, How much? I don't know exactly. You know? Around 40,000. My breath caught. 40,000. That recording was made months before the total reached more than 200,000. Richard spoke again. Did you ask your mother? No. Did you ask me then? No. Then you didn't borrow anything. Another long silence. Richard finally said the word I never imagined hearing him say to his own son. You stole it. David's answer came immediately. I was going to pay it back. When, as soon as the development closed, the development failed. It wasn't supposed to. You gambled with your mother's retirement. I was trying to save the company. Richard's voice became firmer. You were trying to save yourself. The recording ended. No dramatic music, no shouting, just silence. I looked at Susan. Neither of us spoke. We opened the next file. March 21st. Richard sounded more tired. So, how much is missing now? David answered quietly. 73,000. I closed my eyes. Every recording pushed the number higher. Richard asked, Does Carolyn know you? No. Good. I frowned. Good, Richard continued. She doesn't deserve this. I'll fix it. No. Richard's voice was sharper. You'll tell her. I can't. You will. If she finds out, she'll hate me. Richard answered so softly that I almost missed it. She'll hate what you've done. The recording ended again. I whispered, Why didn't he tell me? Susan looked toward Richard's photograph. Maybe he was trying to give David one last chance. I wished she were right. We opened another file. May 2nd. This time there were 3 voices. Richard, David, Melissa. Melissa sounded exactly as she always did. Calm, pleasant, confident. If Carolyn eventually inherits everything anyway, she said, Why does the timing matter? Richard answered immediately, Because it belongs to her. It belongs to the family. It belongs to my wife. Melissa laughed softly. Richard, we're talking about paperwork. No, we're talking about protecting her. You don't protect someone by taking away their choices. I felt tears forming again. Richard had defended me. Melissa continued. She forgets things. So do I. She's getting older. So am I. There are legal ways to simplify this. Richard remained silent. Melissa lowered her voice. If Carolyn were declared legally incapable, I froze. David could manage everything. Richard interrupted her. No. You haven't even heard the proposal. I've heard enough. Melissa didn't stop. She doesn't need to know. I gripped the edge of the desk. Older people are declared incompetent every day. Richard's chair moved suddenly. I said no. Another pause. Then Melissa spoke more quietly. People believe paperwork, Richard answered with a sentence that made my heart break. And someday they'll know who created it. The recording ended. Susan slowly removed her glasses. I never imagined she'd say it out loud. I couldn't speak. The woman who had spent years bringing me soup when I was sick. The woman who hugged me every Christmas. Had calmly discussed taking away my legal rights. We opened another recording. August 14th. Richard sounded exhausted. So you forged my signature. David didn't answer. Richard repeated himself. Look at me. Several seconds passed. Finally, David whispered. I practiced. My body went cold. I never wanted it to get this far. Richard asked, Did Melissa know? Another pause. Yes. Whose idea was it? David answered quietly. The first transfer was mine. I looked at Susan. This mattered. David continued. The paperwork? Another long pause. That was Melissa. So she suggested declaring Carolyn incompetent. Yes. Did you object? No. Richard sighed. Then you're equally responsible. David's voice cracked. I just wanted more time. You've had a year. I can still fix it. No, Richard answered. You've stopped trying to fix it. You've started hiding it. The file ended. I leaned back in Richard's chair. Everything we believed was changing. Melissa had designed the trap, but David had already become a thief before she ever joined him. Susan reached for another file. This one's different. December 6th. Only 11 days before Richard died. Richard spoke first. I know someone's entering my study. My pulse quickened. I've changed the lock twice. He paused. The false papers are still in the drawer. Another pause. I'm leaving them there. Susan looked at me. Richard continued. If they're taken, I'll know who wanted them. If they're used, I'll know who committed the fraud. I whispered, the trap. Susan nodded. Richard wasn't hiding the forged papers. He was watching them. The final words of the recording sent chills through both of us. If you're listening to this, Ellie... He stopped. A door opened somewhere in the room. Richard lowered his voice. They're here. The recording cut off. No footsteps, no names, just silence. Susan slowly closed the laptop. I think someone interrupted him. I think so too. Neither of us moved. Finally, I remembered the brass key. It has initials. J.W. Susan picked it up. Who do we know with those initials? I searched my memory. Neighbors, church friends, old coworkers, nothing. Then Richard's desk calendar caught my eye. One appointment from months before his death had been circled. Meeting J. Walker. My heart skipped. James Walker. Susan frowned. The attorney. Richard's attorney. The family lawyer. Yes. Susan turned the key over again. It can't be a coincidence. I suddenly remembered another detail. Richard always trusted James. He handled our will. Our house. The company. Everything important. If the key belonged anywhere, it belonged with James Walker. I slipped the brass key into my pocket. Then I folded Richard's handwritten letter one more time. We're calling him. Susan nodded. But not from this house. Why, if David or Melissa are watching, she glanced toward the front window. Let's not tell them our next move. For the first time since Richard died, I wasn't reacting to events anymore. I was following the path he had left behind. And somewhere at the end of that path, I believed Richard had hidden one final piece of the truth. Susan insisted we leave my house before calling James Walker. If David or Melissa are watching, she said, they'll expect us to stay here. She was right. Instead of using my home phone, we drove 20 minutes to a small diner outside Cedar Falls, where Richard and I used to stop after church on Sundays. I almost smiled when I saw the faded sign. Richard always ordered blueberry pancakes. Even now, I could almost hear him asking for extra butter. Susan dialed James's office from her cell phone. The receptionist answered. Walker Legal. We need to speak with James Walker. It's about Richard Hall. There was a brief pause. Then another voice came on the line. Carolyn. James sounded surprised. It's me. My goodness, how are you holding up? I've been better. I imagine? His voice was warm, but cautious. I need to see you. Of course. It's important. Does this have anything to do with Richard's study? Susan and I looked at each other. How did you know? I asked. James became quiet. Can you come to my office? Today? The sooner the better. His tone changed. And Carolyn, yes? Did Richard leave you a brass key? My breath caught. I slowly reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal. Yes. I thought so. How did you know? Bring it. James, I'll explain when you get here. He ended the call. Neither Susan nor I spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, she whispered, He knew. I nodded. He knew something. We drove to downtown Cedar Falls in complete silence. Richard had trusted James for more than 30 years. He handled our wills. He helped us buy our house. He represented the family business. If Richard trusted anyone outside our family, it was him. When we arrived, James met us himself. He looked older than I remembered. His gray hair had thinned considerably, but his handshake remained firm. "I'm glad you came." "So are we." He locked the office door behind us. "I don't usually do that," he said, "but today feels different." He led us into a conference room. No assistants, no interruptions, only the three of us. James looked directly at me. "Did Richard leave you a letter?" "Yes." "Did it mention trusting Susan?" I nodded slowly. "It did." James closed his eyes for a moment. "He finished it." "What do you mean?" "He wasn't sure he'd have enough time." My heart tightened. I knew Richard believed someone was stealing from you." Susan leaned forward. "Did he tell you who? No." "Why not?" "He said if he accused the wrong person without enough proof, he'd destroy what was left of his family." That sounded exactly like Richard. James continued. "He promised he'd return once he had everything." "But he died." "Yes." He looked genuinely saddened. "He had an appointment with me the morning after he passed away." "What was the appointment for?" James opened a folder. "He wanted to update every legal document you owned." I frowned. "The papers in Richard's drawer were never filed." "What?" "I searched every court record after his death." James leaned toward me. "No petition declaring you incompetent was ever submitted." I looked at Susan. "So Richard never intended?" "No." James shook his head. "He never filed anything." "But why keep the papers?" "I don't know." I reached into my purse and handed him Richard's letter. James read it silently. When he reached the final line, he looked at me with moist eyes. "He loved you very much." "I know." "He blamed himself. For Susan." James nodded. "He mentioned that more than once." Susan quietly looked away. Then James noticed the brass key. "You brought it." He extended his hand. I hesitated. Richard had hidden it for a reason. James smiled gently. "You don't have to trust me." I trusted Richard. So did I. Slowly, I placed the key in his palm. He turned it over, then smiled sadly. "I was hoping I'd never see this again." He stood. "Come with me." He led us through a hallway into a room protected by a steel security door. Inside stood dozens of locked document boxes. Some were small, some were large. James stopped before one gray metal box. Its lock matched the brass key perfectly. My heart raced. He handed me the key. "This must be opened by you." Not by him. Not by Susan. By me. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. It turned smoothly. The lid clicked open. Inside lay several thick folders, a sealed envelope, and another handwritten note from Richard. Before I reached for it, James spoke quietly. "I think you should see something first." He removed one folder. Across the front, Richard had written in black marker, "Original Will." James opened it carefully. "This is Richard's final signed will." I quickly scanned the pages. There was no transfer of my house to David, no automatic power of attorney, no declaration that I was mentally incompetent. Instead, everything remained exactly as Richard and I had always planned. If he died first, everything belonged to me, entirely. No restrictions, no conditions. I looked up. "So the papers at home were never his final wishes?" James nodded. "No." Susan whispered, "Thank God." James reached for another folder. Inside were copies of every forged document we had already found. Except, these copies contained handwritten notes in Richard's handwriting. Each page had dates, times, observations. One note read, "Melissa placed this document inside my desk while I was hospitalized." Another read, "David believes these papers are authentic. Do not remove them yet." My breathing became shallow. Richard had documented everything, every lie, every change, every movement. James opened the sealed envelope last. "This one," he said quietly, "was addressed to me." He removed one page. "Richard instructed me to give it to you only if you arrived with the brass key." I nodded. James handed it to me. Richard's handwriting filled every line. James remained silent while I read. "Ellie, if you've reached this box, then you already know the papers in my desk were never meant to control you. They were meant to expose whoever tried to use them. I made one terrible mistake. I believed David instead of Susan. By the time I discovered the truth, the damage was already done. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I hope Susan will. Please remember one thing. Everything I own belongs to you. Not because you're my wife. Because you're fully capable of deciding your own future. No one, not even our children, should ever take that choice from you." I wiped tears from my face. Richard hadn't just protected my finances. He had protected my dignity. James quietly said, "There is one more thing." He reached into the box again. Inside was a legal document naming Susan. I looked at it carefully. It wasn't a power of attorney. It was something different. "Designation of financial advisor," James explained. "Richard wanted Susan available to help you." He paused. "Only if you chose." "Not automatically, no. You remain completely in control." I smiled through my tears. "That sounds like Richard." James nodded. "He never wanted anyone making decisions for you." For the first time since Richard died, I felt him standing beside me again. Not as a man hiding secrets, but as a husband trying desperately to repair his mistakes. Then James's expression changed. He became serious. "Unfortunately, my heart tightened. There's something else you need to know." "What is it?" "I checked county property records this morning. And," he took a slow breath, "someone has already started using those forged documents." The room suddenly became very quiet. "What do you mean?" James looked directly at me. "Carolyn, they've already begun trying to use your house. They've already begun trying to use your house." James's words echoed through the conference room. I stared at him, unable to speak. Susan leaned forward. "What exactly does that mean?" James opened another folder. "This morning, I searched Black Hawk County property records after reviewing Richard's files." He slid several printed pages across the table. "There was a preliminary financing application submitted against your home." I looked at the address. It was mine. The house Richard and I had lived in for more than 40 years. "No," I whispered. James nodded gravely. "The application lists your property as collateral. I never signed anything. I know." Susan picked up the first page. "Who submitted this?" "The application was filed by a private lending company." "Who signed it?" James pointed to the last page. "There." I looked down. My name appeared beneath the authorization. Carolyn Hall. It looked convincing, but it wasn't mine. "I didn't write that." "I know." James placed another sheet beside it. "This is your real signature from your will." The difference was obvious. The forged version copied the shape, not the rhythm. Someone had traced my identity. Susan flipped another page. Her face hardened. They attached the power of attorney. The forged one? I asked. Yes. James nodded. And they included the medical letter claiming you were mentally incompetent. My stomach twisted. They actually used it. They did? I felt sick. Richard had been right. The forged papers hadn't been created to frighten me. They had been created to steal everything. How much is the loan? Susan asked. James answered quietly. $400,000. The number stole the air from the room. Our house isn't worth that much, I whispered. It doesn't need to be. What do you mean? The loan is secured against the property's equity. Susan frowned. So if payments stop, James finished the sentence. They could force the sale. I closed my eyes. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were preparing to lose my house while I was still living inside it. When is the closing? Susan asked. James looked at another page. 5 days. 5 days. I felt my pulse racing. If this goes through? James nodded. You'll spend years trying to untangle it. Susan stood up. We call the police. Not yet. Both of us looked at James. Why not? Because we need to stop the loan first. Isn't forgery enough? It will be. He remained calm. But right now, your priority is protecting Carolyn's home. He reached for his phone. I'm contacting the lender immediately. What will you tell them? That there is credible evidence of fraud. He paused. They'll freeze the application temporarily. Temporarily. They'll want proof. We have proof. We have strong evidence. He corrected himself carefully. But we'll need more. I suddenly remembered something. The recordings. James nodded. They help. So do the forged medical letter and Dr. Reynolds' statement. What else? James looked directly at me. We need to establish who knowingly submitted the paperwork. Susan crossed her arms. David. Perhaps. Perhaps. James remained patient. We know David stole money. We know Melissa created false documents. What we don't yet know, he tapped the loan application, is who actually filed this. The distinction mattered. Susan sat down again. James continued. If David knowingly submitted forged documents? He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I understood. The consequences would be far more serious. My phone vibrated. David. I stared at the screen. James quietly shook his head. Answer. You want me to? Yes? Act normally. I pressed the speaker button. Hello? Mom? His voice sounded cheerful. I've been trying to reach you. I've been out. Everything okay? Fine. Have you thought any more about moving? I looked at Susan. She silently motioned for me to keep talking. A little? I found another wonderful community. I'm sure you did. David laughed. You sound better. I've had time to think. Good. He hesitated. I could come by tonight. No. The answer escaped before I thought about it. There was a brief silence. I mean, I quickly corrected myself. Susan's visiting. His tone changed instantly. She's there? Yes. For how long? I don't know. Another pause. What have you two been doing? Talking. About Dad. Mostly. He laughed softly. You know how Susan is. I didn't answer. He continued. Mom? Yes. I hope she isn't filling your head with stories. I remembered Melissa saying almost the exact same words. No. I replied quietly. My head is clearer than it's been in months. Silence. Then David changed the subject. If you need anything, I'll let you know. He ended the call first. James slowly leaned back. He wasn't asking how you were. No. He wanted to know how much you knew. I nodded. For the first time? I heard it too. Not concern. Investigation. James picked up another folder. There's something else. He handed me a copy of Richard's handwritten statement. Unlike the letter to me, this one had been prepared formally. Every page was signed and dated. Richard described the missing money, his conversations with David, his regret over Susan. Then I reached one sentence that made my hands freeze. I have reason to believe my study has been searched without my permission on multiple occasions. I looked up. He knew. James nodded. He told me someone was entering the house. I remembered the recording. I've changed the lock twice. The final paragraph was written only weeks before Richard died. If I fail to complete the legal changes before my death, whoever attempts to use the false documents will reveal themselves. Please make sure Carolyn understands one thing. She was never the target. Her home was. I covered my mouth. The entire plan suddenly made sense. The forged diagnosis. The power of attorney. The deed. The pressure to move. The missing key. The late-night attempt to enter my house. Everything pointed toward one goal. My home. James quietly folded the statement. I believe Richard knew he was running out of time. So he built a trap. Yes. Susan looked toward me. It worked. I nodded slowly. But only because Ethan warned me. The room became quiet again. I thought about my grandson, 11 years old, carrying a secret no child should have carried. Then my phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't David. It was an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer. Something told me to pick up. Hello. For several seconds, nothing. Then I heard breathing, very soft, almost like someone hiding. Finally, a tiny voice whispered, Grandma? Ethan. Don't tell Mom I called. I won't. I heard them. My heart pounded. Heard who? My mom and dad. What did they say? They were fighting. I stood up. Susan watched my face carefully. What happened, sweetheart? They said, his voice trembled. They have to finish everything before you talk to the lawyer. Every hair on my arms stood up. What else did they say? I don't remember. Ethan, I got scared. It's okay. I think Dad knows you opened Grandpa's drawer. I looked at James. He had heard every word. Grandma, I'm here. Please don't let them be mad at me. My eyes filled with tears. I'm not angry with you. I think it's my fault. No. I spoke as firmly as I could. Listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. But Grandpa told me. I know. You did exactly what Grandpa asked. He began crying softly. I don't want our family to disappear. I closed my eyes. Part of it already had, but another part was finally telling the truth. We're going to protect you, I whispered. I promise. The call ended. None of us spoke. James slowly closed the file in front of him. They're running out of time. Susan nodded. So are we. The room fell silent after Ethan's call. James folded his hands on the table. They're accelerating. Susan nodded. They know they're running out of time? I looked at the loan application again. 5 days. That was all that stood between me and losing the home Richard and I had spent a lifetime building. What do we do now? I asked. James answered immediately. We stopped the closing. How? Legally? He turned his computer monitor toward us. The lender has already acknowledged my fraud notice. Then we're safe. Not yet. He shook his head. They've only paused the file. How long? 48 hours. I felt my stomach tighten again. After that, they'll either reject the application, he paused, or continue with it. What decides that evidence? Susan leaned forward. We have forged signatures. We have the doctor's statement. We have Richard's recordings. James nodded. Yes, but I also need to prove the people submitting these documents knew they were false. I understood what he meant. If someone else had unknowingly forwarded forged paperwork proving fraud became more complicated. But if David knowingly submitted it, everything changed. James printed several forms. I'll prepare sworn affidavits. He handed one to me. I need you to describe everything exactly as it happened. When I found the drawer, yes. And afterward, I spent nearly an hour writing, opening the drawer, finding the petition, David arriving unexpectedly, Melissa entering my home with a copied key, the forged doctor's letter, Dr. Reynolds confirming it was fake, the hidden compartment, Richard's letter. Every memory felt heavier as I placed it on paper. When I finished, James reviewed every page. Good. Good. It's detailed. I wish it didn't exist. So do I. He placed the affidavit into a folder. I'll file this today. Before we left, James looked directly at me. Carolyn. Yes. Whatever happens next. He paused. Don't confront David alone. I wasn't planning to. I mean it. He has too much to lose. The drive home felt strangely quiet. Susan stared out the passenger window. What are you thinking? I asked. David. So am I. She sighed. I keep trying to remember when he changed. I smiled sadly. I keep trying to remember if he ever did. Neither answer brought comfort. When we reached my house, I noticed something unusual. The mailbox door was open. I closed that this morning. Susan looked around. No mail carrier this late. We walked carefully toward it. Inside was a plain white envelope. No stamp, no address. Only one word. Carolyn. I looked at Susan. You think, open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, not handwritten. Stop asking questions. Sell the house. No one else has to get hurt. My hands went cold. Susan immediately looked around the street. No one. The neighborhood appeared perfectly normal. Children rode bicycles. A man watered his lawn. An elderly couple walked their dog. Life continued as though my world wasn't collapsing. Call James, Susan said. I did. He answered on the second ring. Don't touch the paper any more than necessary, he said. Put it inside a plastic bag. You think they'll find fingerprints? Maybe. He paused. But more importantly, yes, they're scared. I frowned. Why would threatening me mean they're scared? Because innocent people don't send anonymous warnings. That night, Susan insisted on staying. We checked every door, every window, every lock. Then she surprised me. I'm sleeping in Dad's study. What? If someone comes back? She looked toward Richard's desk. This is where they'll come. I wanted to argue. Instead, I brought her an extra blanket. Around midnight, neither of us was asleep. I sat in the kitchen drinking tea while Susan organized every document we had collected. Real papers, forged papers, medical records, bank statements, audio transcripts, The piles kept growing. "This isn't just evidence," she whispered. "It's a timeline." I walked over. She had arranged everything by date. One column showed Richard's declining health. Another showed missing money. Another showed forged paperwork. For the first time, we could actually see the pattern. Every time Richard became weaker, the fraud became bolder. Every hospitalization was followed by another transfer, another forged document, another attempt to gain control. Susan suddenly stopped moving. "Wait, what?" She pointed to 2 dates. "Look, October 14th, the forged power of attorney. October 15th, another bank transfer. Then, October 16th, Richard returned home from the hospital." "He came home," I whispered, "and immediately changed the lock on the study." Susan looked at me. "He already knew." He knew someone had been inside. Before either of us could say another word, the front porch light came on, automatically, motion detected. Susan looked at me. "Did you install motion lights?" "No." We both froze. A shadow crossed the front window, then another. Someone was outside. Susan quietly picked up her phone. "I'm calling 911. I moved toward the hallway. Very slowly, the doorbell rang. Once, then again. 3 slow chimes. Whoever stood outside wasn't trying to break in. They wanted me to answer. The police dispatcher stayed on speaker while officers headed toward my address. The bell rang a 3rd time, then stopped. Silence. I looked through the narrow glass beside the front door. No one. Only darkness. Then, movement. Not at the front porch. The backyard. "They're behind the house," I whispered. Susan immediately switched off every downstairs light. We stood in darkness listening. A faint scraping sound came from Richard's study window. Someone was trying to force it open. The very room that contained Richard's desk. The very room where the hidden compartment had been. "They think everything's still there?" Susan whispered. Headlights suddenly swept across the backyard. Police. The scraping stopped instantly. Footsteps, fast, running. An officer shouted, "Police, stop!" A fence slammed, then another, within seconds. The backyard became silent again. The officers searched the neighborhood for nearly an hour. No arrest, no suspect. But one officer returned carrying something he had found beneath the study window. A black leather glove. He sealed it into an evidence bag. "Whoever was here knew exactly which room they wanted," he said. After they left, Susan and I stood inside Richard's study. The desk remained untouched. The hidden compartment was empty. The real evidence was already with James. I rested my hand on Richard's chair. "They're too late." Susan nodded. "Yes." Then she looked directly at me. "But now they'll know the trap is closing." For the first time, I realized something important. We were no longer chasing the truth. The truth was chasing them. The police left just before sunrise. They collected the black glove, photographed the damaged study window, and promised to increase patrols around my neighborhood. But promises could not quiet my mind. Someone had stood outside my home in the dark. Someone had tried to reach Richard's desk. Someone knew the truth was slipping away. Susan finally convinced me to lie down for a few hours. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard hiding papers beneath that false drawer. Every time I opened them again, I remembered David's voice. "I borrowed the money." No, he hadn't borrowed it. He had stolen it. Around 8 that morning, James called. "I've spoken with the lender. And they've frozen the loan application. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all night. For how long? Until they complete an internal fraud review. Does that stop everything? For now. His voice remained cautious. But don't mistake a delay for a victory. I understand. They've also asked for every piece of evidence we discussed. We'll send it. I'm sending copies this afternoon. He paused. One more thing. Yes. If David contacts you, I know. Don't tell him about the recordings. I won't. After hanging up, I found Susan standing in Richard's study. She wasn't looking at the desk. She was looking at Richard's photograph. He really believed we'd figure it out. I think he did. He trusted Ethan. So did Ethan. We both smiled faintly. Without my grandson's whispered warning, none of this would have happened. I suddenly looked at Susan. I need to see him. She nodded immediately. I was thinking the same thing. Melissa won't let us. Maybe. She picked up her phone. But school might. An hour later, we parked outside Ethan's elementary school. We had already spoken with the principal explaining that I wanted to have lunch with my grandson. Because I was his grandmother, the visit was allowed. When Ethan walked into the office, he froze. Grandma? He ran straight into my arms. I held him tighter than I ever had before. I missed you. I missed you too. He smiled at Susan. Aunt Susan. She hugged him gently. It's been a long time. He nodded. I know. The principal left us alone in a small conference room. For several minutes, we talked about ordinary things. School, baseball, his science project. I wanted him to feel safe. Finally, I asked the question that had stayed in my heart since the day he whispered in my ear. Ethan. He looked at me. What exactly did Grandpa tell you? His smile disappeared. He made me promise. I know. But Grandpa wanted me to understand. Ethan stared at the table. Then he quietly began speaking. It was when he was sick. At home? Yes. He asked me to help him clean his office. I remembered those afternoons. I had been grocery shopping most of the time. He opened the drawer. What happened? He showed me all the papers. My heart skipped. Did he explain them? No. He just said they were bad. Susan leaned forward carefully. What else did Grandpa say? Ethan looked at both of us. He said, his voice became almost a whisper. People can hide lies under smiles. I felt tears gathering again. Then what? He told me never to trust what I saw first. I frowned. What do you mean? He tapped the drawer. Ethan copied Richard's movement with one finger. Right here. He said. The little boy paused, trying to remember every word. Don't trust what you see first. Always look underneath. Susan slowly covered her mouth. Richard hadn't only hidden evidence. He had hidden instructions. Instructions meant for a child who couldn't be manipulated by forged paperwork. Ethan continued. I asked why. What did Grandpa say? He said. The boy looked directly at me. Because bad people hope you'll stop looking after the first answer. Silence filled the room. I finally understood. The forged petition, the medical letter, the fake power of attorney. They had all been designed to make me stop searching, to make me believe Richard had betrayed me. If I believed that, I would never have looked beneath the drawer. Richard knew that, so he taught Ethan the simplest lesson possible. Look underneath, always. I gently squeezed Ethan's hand. Did Grandpa tell you anything else? He nodded. He said if anything happened to him. His eyes filled with tears. I had to tell you. But only you. Why only me? Because... He looked down. He said grown-ups sometimes lie. The innocence of those words hurt more than anything else. No child should ever have to carry that burden. Susan smiled softly. You were very brave. I was scared. I know. I thought Mom would get mad. I swallowed hard. Did she... He nodded once. After I told Grandma. My heart tightened. What happened? Dad asked me what Grandpa said. And I said I forgot. Was that true? He shook his head. No. Why did you say that? His answer broke me. Because Grandpa said if I told the wrong person. He paused. They might hurt Grandma. I couldn't stop the tears anymore. I pulled him into another hug. You protected me. He buried his face against my shoulder. I tried. No. I kissed the top of his head. You did. We spent another half hour together before school resumed. As Ethan walked back toward his classroom, he suddenly turned around. Grandma. Yes. Are you still looking underneath? I smiled through my tears. Every day. He grinned. Good. Then he disappeared down the hallway. Neither Susan nor I spoke until we reached the parking lot. Finally, she whispered, Dad trusted him because children notice things adults ignore. I nodded. They also tell the truth. When we returned home, another surprise was waiting. David's truck sat in my driveway. He leaned against the hood with his arms crossed. He wasn't smiling. As soon as he saw us, he walked forward. Where have you been? I stopped several feet away. Out. Doing what? Living my life. His jaw tightened. I've been calling. I know. You didn't answer. I wasn't available. He glanced toward Susan. So, that's how it's going to be. What do you mean? You and Susan against us. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. For the first time, I noticed something I had ignored for years. He wasn't angry because I had called Susan. He was angry because he was losing control. He stepped closer. Mom. What? I need you to trust me. I answered without raising my voice. I did. His face changed instantly, only for a second, but it was enough. Enough for me to know. He understood exactly what I meant. David lowered his eyes for only a second. When he looked back at me, the warmth in his face had disappeared. I don't know what Susan has been telling you, he said. I answered calmly. She's been telling me the truth. He laughed once, a short, nervous laugh. Truth. Yes. You've known her for 2 days after ignoring her for 3 years. I've known you your entire life. That sentence landed harder than I expected. David looked away first. Can we talk inside? He asked. Susan stepped between us. We'll talk here. He frowned. This is between me and my mother. No, I replied quietly. It stopped being only between us a long time ago. Neighbors were outside mowing lawns and walking dogs. None of them seemed to notice the conversation. But I was grateful we weren't alone. David took a slow breath. Mom, I know you're upset. I was. What changed? I stopped believing every story I was told. His jaw tightened again. What stories? I didn't answer. Instead, I asked a question. Did you copy the key to my house? He hesitated. Yes. Why, in case of an emergency. Then why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it mattered. It mattered. He nodded once. I'm sorry. Months ago, that apology would have softened me. Now, it felt rehearsed. Before either of us spoke again, another car pulled into my driveway. Melissa stepped out. She walked quickly toward us, smiling as though she had just arrived at a family picnic. "There you all are." Nobody answered. She looked from me to Susan. "I've been trying to reach everyone." "We've been busy," Susan said. Melissa folded her arms. "I can see that." Then she looked directly at me. "Carolyn, I think we're making this situation much bigger than it needs to be." I asked quietly, "Am I?" "Yes." "Someone forged medical records?" Silence. "Someone entered my home?" Silence. "Someone submitted a loan against my house." Her smile disappeared, only for an instant. But I saw it. David saw it too. He immediately spoke. "What loan?" I turned toward him. "You don't know?" "No." "Really?" Melissa answered before he could. "What loan are you talking about?" Susan laughed softly. "You two should decide which one of you is pretending first." Melissa's face hardened. "I don't appreciate accusations. I don't appreciate forged documents." The conversation stopped. Nobody moved. Finally, David sighed. "Mom." "What?" "I think everyone's confused." I almost smiled. There it was again. Confused? Always confused. Always trying to convince me that reality belonged to someone else. Instead of arguing, I reached into my purse. I removed my phone. David frowned. "What are you doing?" I opened the audio folder James had copied for us. Not every recording, just one. The one dated May 2nd. I pressed play. Richard's voice filled the quiet street. "You don't protect someone by taking away their choices." Melissa's eyes widened. David froze. The recording continued. If Carolyn were declared legally incapable, Melissa's own voice echoed across the driveway. David could manage everything. Richard answered immediately. "No." Then came the sentence that changed everything. "People believe paperwork." The recording ended. Nobody spoke. Melissa looked pale. David stared at the ground. Finally he whispered, "Where did you get that?" I answered, "From your father." He looked up so quickly I almost stepped back. "No." "Yes. That's impossible." He hid it. His breathing became faster. Melissa grabbed his arm. "David." He ignored her. "What else did he leave?" I stayed silent. He took one step closer. "What else?" Susan spoke instead. "Enough." David turned toward her. "You knew." "I do now." "You've poisoned her." Susan shook her head. "No. Your father left the poison. He also left the cure." Melissa suddenly spoke. "Those recordings don't prove anything." I looked at her. "They prove you discussed declaring me incompetent. We were trying to protect you." Richard's voice echoed in my memory. "People believe paperwork." I quietly asked, "Protect me from what?" She had no answer. David finally found his voice. "Mom?" "No." I interrupted him. "Today you answer my questions." He swallowed hard. "Fine. Did you take money from our retirement account?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." Susan and I exchanged a glance. This was the first time he had admitted it to my face. "How much?" "I don't know." I shook my head. "Try again." He whispered, "A lot." "Did your father know?" "Eventually." "Did you lie to him?" "Yes." "Did you lie to me?" He looked directly into my eyes. "Yes." Those two letters hurt more than everything else. Not because they surprised me, because I had waited my whole life to hear them. Melissa grabbed his shoulder. "Stop talking." David pulled away. "No," She stared at him. "What are you doing?" "I'm tired." "Tired? I'm tired of pretending." Melissa lowered her voice. "They don't know everything. They know enough." I watched them carefully. For the first time, they weren't acting like husband and wife. They looked like two people trying to save themselves. David turned back toward me. "I never wanted to hurt you," I answered honestly. "But you did. I thought I could replace the money." "You couldn't." "I know. I kept waiting." "For what?" "For the next project. The next investment. The next chance." He laughed bitterly. "It never came." I looked at him for a long moment. "My son disappeared before your father died." His eyes filled with tears. "I know." "No." I shook my head. "I don't think you do." Melissa stepped forward again. "This conversation is over." "No?" Susan replied. "It's finally beginning." Melissa reached for David's hand. "We're leaving." David didn't move. Instead, he asked one quiet question. "Did Dad record everything?" I thought about Richard, his careful planning, his hidden compartment, his final letter. Then I answered with complete honesty. "I don't know." That answer frightened David more than any accusation. Because if he didn't know what Richard had recorded, he couldn't know what evidence still existed. Melissa finally pulled him toward the truck. "We need to go." David didn't resist. He climbed into the passenger seat without another word. Melissa started the engine. Before driving away, she rolled down the window. "This isn't over." I met her eyes. "No, it isn't." They drove away without looking back. Susan released a slow breath. "You didn't tell them about the rest?" "No." "The recordings? The bank statements? The hidden compartment? The lawyer?" I shook my head. Richard built one trap. I looked down the empty street where David's truck had disappeared. I'm not going to spring it too early, because after seeing the fear in my son's face, I understood something Richard had known before I did. The truth wasn't just exposing them anymore. It was forcing them to make mistakes. And frightened people always make the biggest ones. After David and Melissa drove away, neither Susan nor I moved. The street became quiet again. Only the sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the block reminded me that the rest of the world had no idea what had just happened in my driveway. Susan finally spoke. "He cracked." I nodded. "Not completely, but enough." I kept thinking about one moment. Not David. Melissa. The instant I played Richard's recording, she hadn't looked surprised. She had looked defeated. That expression stayed with me all afternoon. Around 3 o'clock, James called. "I've listened to every recording. And they're stronger than I expected." "Is it enough? For criminal investigators?" He paused. "Combined with the forged documents, yes." I let out a slow breath. "But there is always a but. We still need them to explain themselves." "They already have." "Not officially." He continued calmly. "If David or Melissa voluntarily admit anything else, it strengthens every charge." I thought about the fear on David's face. "I think he's close." "So do I." That evening, just after sunset, my phone rang again. This time, it was David. I looked at Susan. She nodded. "Answer." I pressed the speaker button. "Hello?" His voice sounded exhausted. "Mom, can we meet? Why, I need to talk." "We talked today?" "Not really." "What changed?" A long silence followed. Finally, he whispered, "I can't do this anymore." Susan quickly wrote 3 words on a notepad. Public place only. I nodded. If we meet, I said carefully, it won't be alone. I understand. And Susan will be there. Another pause. Okay. We agreed to meet at a quiet park the next morning. After hanging up, Susan looked at me. He's scared. I know. He isn't calling because he suddenly became honest. No. He's calling because he's losing. I knew she was right. Still, a small part of me remembered the little boy who used to run into my arms after school. I wondered if even a tiny piece of that child still existed. The next morning, the park was almost empty. Only a few people walked along the trail. David was already waiting on a bench beside the pond. He looked terrible. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. He had clearly not slept. When he saw us, he stood slowly. Thanks for coming. I didn't answer. Susan remained beside me. David looked around. I don't want anyone overhearing. You should have thought about that before stealing from us. He lowered his head. I deserve that. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then David surprised me. I'm sorry. Real tears filled his eyes. I know saying it doesn't fix anything. No, it doesn't. I lied. Yes. I stole. Yes. I betrayed Dad. Yes. Every answer became heavier than the one before. Finally, he whispered, I betrayed you. I nodded once. You did. He sat back down. I wish I could go back. You can't. I know. He buried his face in his hands. I never thought it would become this. Susan asked quietly, Then how did it begin? David slowly looked up. With one transfer? How much? 5,000. The first one. He nodded. My business was failing. I thought I'd replace it in a few weeks. But you didn't. No. So you took more. Yes. His voice shook. I kept believing the next project would save me. I remembered Richard saying almost the same thing in the recordings. The next investment. The next chance. There never was a next chance, David whispered. There was only more debt. Susan folded her arms. When did Melissa find out? David hesitated. After the third transfer. So she didn't convince you to steal? No. Then whose idea was it? My own. That answer mattered. It matched Richard's recordings exactly. Susan continued. Then why forge the paperwork? David closed his eyes. I told Melissa everything. And she said if Mom couldn't legally control the money? He stopped. Susan finished the sentence. Then nobody could question where it went. David nodded. I should have walked away. But you didn't. No. He looked directly at me. I was terrified. Of prison? No. Of disappointing you? I answered honestly. You should have been terrified of both. He accepted that without arguing. Then he said something I hadn't expected. Melissa pushed harder than I did. Susan raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? At first? David swallowed. I only wanted time. And Melissa. She wanted control. He rubbed his forehead. She kept saying once Mom was declared incompetent. He couldn't finish. Susan did. Everything would become easier. David nodded. I told myself it was temporary. But it wasn't. No. It became the plan. His shoulders shook. I hate myself for letting it happen. Before I could answer, another voice interrupted. So this is where you are. Melissa. She walked toward us across the grass. Her face was pale with anger. She stopped beside David. I've been looking everywhere. He didn't stand. I needed to talk. Without me? Yes. She laughed bitterly. That's convenient. Then she looked at me. Don't believe everything he says. I remained silent. Melissa pointed at David. He wants someone else to blame. David finally stood. I'm telling the truth. No, you are. You started this. Melissa stared at him. I started it. You heard me. She folded her arms. I didn't steal your parents' money. David nodded slowly. No, you did. But I never would have forged anything. Melissa stepped closer. You forged your father's signature. I know. You lied for over a year. I know. You came to me after everything was already falling apart. David looked at me. That's true. Melissa laughed again. So now I'm the villain, Susan answered quietly. No. You're both responsible. Melissa shook her head. No. She pointed directly at David. He stole the money. She pointed at herself. I tried to save him. David looked stunned. Save me? Yes. You kept saying another project would fix everything? It didn't. So I found another solution. A criminal solution. Her eyes filled with tears. I wasn't trying to hurt your mother. I finally spoke. But you were willing to. Melissa couldn't answer. David looked at her with an expression I had never seen before. Not love, not anger, recognition, as if he were finally seeing the person standing beside him. He whispered, We destroyed everything. Melissa looked away. No, we're trying to survive. David slowly shook his head. No, we stopped surviving a long time ago. He looked back at me. We became the people Dad warned us about. Nobody spoke. The wind gently rippled across the pond. For a brief moment, the four of us simply stood there surrounded by the silence we had created. Then David quietly said the words I had waited years to hear. I'm ready to tell the police everything. Melissa's head snapped toward him. What? I'm done lying. I'm done lying. David's words hung in the air. Melissa stared at him as though she had never seen him before. You can't be serious, she whispered. I am. If you talk to the police, I'm going to. You'll destroy us. David looked at her quietly. We destroyed ourselves. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Melissa turned toward me. You wanted this. I shook my head. No. You wanted revenge. No. I wanted the truth. She laughed bitterly. The truth doesn't fix families. I answered softly. Neither do lies. Melissa's shoulders slumped. For the first time since I had known her, she looked tired instead of confident. She looked frightened instead of prepared. David stepped away from her. I'm meeting James. Don't. I'm done listening. You owe me. He looked at her with deep sadness. I owe my mother. Then he walked away. Melissa remained frozen beside the pond. She watched him disappear across the parking lot. Finally, she spoke without looking at me. I loved him. Susan answered quietly. Maybe. But you also helped destroy him. Melissa closed her eyes. I thought I was saving our future. You tried to steal ours. She had no reply. She slowly returned to her car and drove away alone. As I watched her leave, I realized something. For months, maybe years, David and Melissa had acted like one person. Now, the lies separating them were finally stronger than the marriage holding them together. That afternoon, we met James at his office. David was already there. He looked exhausted. James placed a digital recorder on the conference table. David, he spoke calmly. This interview is voluntary. I understand. You may stop at any time. I won't. James pressed record. Please state your full name. David Richard Hall. He looked toward me. I'm sorry. James gently interrupted. We'll begin with the facts. For nearly 2 hours, David talked, not dramatically, not emotionally, simply, truthfully. He admitted taking money from Richard's retirement account. He admitted forging financial signatures. He admitted hiding transfers. He admitted lying to me. Then came the hardest part. James asked, who proposed obtaining control over Carolyn Hall through legal incapacity? David lowered his head. Melissa. Were you present? Yes. Did you agree? Yes. Did you know the medical letter was false? Yes. My eyes closed. Hearing the confession hurt. But strangely, it also brought peace, because uncertainty was finally gone. James continued. Who submitted the loan application using Carolyn Hall's property? David hesitated, then answered. I did. Silence filled the room. Even Susan looked stunned. James repeated the question. You personally filed the application? Yes. Did Melissa instruct you? No. Whose decision was it? David whispered mine. Susan frowned. I thought she wanted control. David nodded. She did. But the loan? He looked directly at me. That was my last attempt to replace everything before anyone discovered the theft. I felt tears filling my eyes again. Even after everything, he had still believed one more lie could erase years of deception. It never could. James stopped the recording. Thank you. David looked completely empty. I don't feel better. James answered honestly. I didn't expect you to. Later that evening, detectives arrived to collect every document. The recordings, the forged medical letter, the bank statements, Richard's handwritten notes, the hidden compartment letter. Everything. One detective carefully packed the evidence. Mrs. Hall. Yes. I've investigated financial fraud for 20 years. He looked at Richard's letter. I've never seen someone document a case this carefully. I smiled sadly. My husband was a teacher. The detective nodded. He taught one final lesson. After everyone left, only Susan and I remained inside the house. For the first time in days, the silence felt peaceful. I walked into Richard's study. The desk stood exactly where it always had. The drawer remained open. Empty now. No forged papers. No hidden evidence. Only wood. Only memories. Susan stood beside me. What are you thinking? I keep wishing Richard could see this. I think he can. I smiled. I don't know. I do. She looked around the room. He spent his final months trying to repair the mistakes he made. He did. And because he never stopped trying, she gently touched my hand. Huh, our family still has a chance. I turned toward her. There were words I should have said years ago. Words that had waited far too long. I'm sorry. Susan looked at me. No excuses. No. No explanations. No. I chose David. Yes. I believed his lies. Yes. I let you leave this family alone. Tears rolled down my face. I did. Susan's eyes filled too. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. She remained silent. I only wanted you to know, my voice broke, that I finally understand what I took from you. Several long seconds passed. Then she stepped forward. She hugged me. Not because everything had been fixed, because healing had finally begun. We both cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like two women carrying years of pain they no longer wish to carry alone. When we finally pulled apart, Susan smiled through her tears. Dad would hate seeing us cry. I laughed softly. He always did. He'd make terrible coffee and tell terrible jokes. We both laughed a little harder, for the first time in a very long time. The laughter didn't hurt. 3 months later, James called again. The prosecutor has filed charges. I listened quietly. Financial fraud, forgery, attempted mortgage fraud, identity-related offenses. Everything Richard had documented. Everything David had confessed. Everything Melissa had denied. The law would now decide the rest. When I hung up, I walked outside onto my front porch. The evening sun covered the old house in warm light. The same house Richard and I had bought when we were young. The same house someone had tried to steal. The same house that never stopped being home. Ethan ran across the yard after school that afternoon. He hugged me tightly. "Grandma?" "Yes. Can I help you clean Grandpa's office someday?" I smiled. "I'd like that." He grinned. "But we already looked underneath." I laughed. "Yes, we did. And Grandpa was right." "He was." Ethan looked toward the old study window, then back at me. "We found the truth." I squeezed his little hand. "Because you remembered." He smiled proudly. "I promised, Grandpa." So did I. And this time, neither of us broke that promise. 1 year later, I unlocked Richard's study just after sunrise. Morning light poured through the same window someone had once tried to force open. The scratches around the frame had been repaired months ago. The fear had faded. The memories had not. Richard's old desk still stood in exactly the same place. Many people had asked why I didn't replace it. Some thought it reminded me of betrayal. They were wrong. It reminded me of truth. I slowly opened the drawer. It was empty now. No forged documents, no hidden letters, no secrets. I gently touched the wooden bottom where the false compartment had once been hidden. Sometimes I still imagined Richard smiling at me from across the room. Not because he had been perfect. He wasn't. He made painful mistakes. He believed the wrong child. He hurt Susan deeply. He left me with terrible questions. But in the end, he chose courage instead of comfort. And because of that choice, our family had one final chance. I heard footsteps behind me. "Grandma!" I turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. He was taller now. His voice had grown deeper over the past year, but his smile was exactly the same. "I brought breakfast. You always know what I need." He handed me 1 mug, then looked at the desk. "You still keep it?" "I always will." He nodded proudly. "I would too." We sat together in silence for a while. Finally, he asked, "Do you ever miss Grandpa?" I smiled. "Every day." "So do I." "But," he looked around the room, "I don't feel sad in here anymore." Neither did I. The room no longer felt like a place filled with lies. It felt like the place where the lies finally ended. Later that morning, Susan arrived carrying fresh cinnamon rolls. She no longer knocked. She simply walked inside like family should, because she was family. Always had been. We hugged. "Morning." "Morning. Anything planned today?" I smiled. "Just peace." She laughed. "That sounds perfect." 1 year had changed many things. Susan and I spoke almost every day. Sometimes we argued, sometimes we laughed, sometimes we simply drank coffee together without saying much at all. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, patient, ordinary, and that made it real. James visited later that afternoon. He had officially retired. He claimed he finally had time to go fishing. I wasn't sure I believed him. He carried a small envelope. I thought you'd like this. Inside was a court document. Final disposition. Every legal matter had finally been completed. The fraudulent loan had been permanently canceled. My property title had been fully restored. Every forged filing had been removed. Richard's true will remained the only valid one. I folded the document carefully. Thank you. James smiled. Don't thank me. Why not? I only followed Richard's map. We all laughed. It was true. Richard had quietly guided all of us long after he was gone. That afternoon, David called. Not from prison. He had accepted responsibility, cooperated fully, and received a reduced sentence that included restitution, probation conditions, and financial penalties instead of a lengthy prison term. The court considered his confession and cooperation. None of that erased what he had done, but it gave him a chance to rebuild honestly. Whether he succeeded, only time would answer. Mom, his voice sounded older, not because of age, because consequences change people. Hello, David. I just wanted to check on you. I'm doing well. I'm glad. A long silence followed. Finally, he spoke again. I know I don't deserve another chance. I answered honestly. No. I know. But I'm still trying to become someone Ethan can respect. That sentence mattered. Not because it erased the past, because it faced the future. I hope you do. So do I. He hesitated. Thank you. For what? For not teaching Ethan to hate me. I looked across the room. My grandson was helping Susan wash dishes, laughing, being a child. I taught him something better. What? The truth. David quietly cried. So did Grandpa. Yes. He did. We ended the call. I didn't know what our relationship would become. Maybe it would never fully recover. Some wounds leave scars forever. But scars are different from open wounds. They remind us where we have been, not where we must stay. A few weeks later, Ethan asked if he could help me organize Richard's study. Together we sorted old books, photographs, teaching awards, family albums. At the very bottom of one box, Ethan found Richard's favorite fountain pen. Can I keep this? I smiled. I think Grandpa would like that. He carefully placed it into his pocket. Then he looked at the desk one last time. Grandma. Yes. What did Grandpa really leave us? I looked around the room. The answer wasn't money. Most of that had been spent recovering what had nearly been stolen. It wasn't the house. Houses can disappear. It wasn't even the evidence. That had already served its purpose. I smiled. He left us the courage to keep looking. Ethan thought about that. Even when the first answer is wrong. Especially then? He nodded. I'll remember. I know you will. That evening, I sat alone on my front porch, watching the sunset. The same porch where I had once stood, terrified. The same porch where anonymous threats had appeared. The same porch where I had watched police cars arrive. Now, children rode bicycles past the house. Neighbors waved. The wind carried the smell of freshly cut grass. Life had quietly returned. I thought about the first day I opened Richard's drawer. I believed I had discovered my husband's betrayal. Instead, I discovered his final act of love. Not a perfect love, not an easy love, but a love willing to leave behind painful truth instead of comforting lies. If you've listened to my story this far, I hope you'll remember one lesson Richard taught all of us. Sometimes the first answer is exactly what someone wants you to believe. Sometimes the truth waits underneath. So don't stop looking after the first disappointment. Don't let anger blind you. Don't let fear make your decisions. And never let anyone convince you that your voice, your memories, or your choices no longer matter. Because the little drawer that nearly destroyed my family ended up saving what was left of it. And every time I open it now, I no longer see betrayal. I see the moment the truth finally came home. Sometimes the people we trust most can make painful mistakes. Sometimes the truth is hidden beneath fear, misunderstanding, or even betrayal. But if we have the courage to keep looking, the truth can still bring healing. I learned that forgiveness does not erase consequences. Trust must be rebuilt one honest step at a time. And I learned that no one, no matter their age, should ever surrender their dignity, their voice, or the right to make their own choices. Most of all, I learned that love is not proven by perfect people. It is proven by those who finally choose the truth, even when the truth hurts. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing meaningful stories like this one. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. If you were in my place, could you ever forgive David? Or would some betrayals be impossible to forgive? And wherever you're watching from today, please tell us your city or country. I read as many comments as I can, and I truly enjoy seeing where everyone is joining us from. Until next time, take care of yourself. Cherish the people who earn your trust, and never stop looking for the truth.